Okay, so we are up to the Mishnah in Yudal Amud Aleph, 14a, in Yoma. Hope everyone's having a good week. And taking up a related topic, Kohen Gadol during the week of his sequestration, preparing for Yom Kippur. So the Kohen Gadol doesn't have to stay indoors. He actually is engaged and involved in avoda. We say in the Mishnah about 8 lines from the top of Yudal Amud Aleph, Kol Shivas Hayamim Huzorik Es Adam. For the duration of his 7 days before, while he's preparing, sequestered for Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol is involved in the avoda, throws the blood, umaktes ketores, offers the incense, umetiv aneros, he puts up together the lamps for the menorah, makriv azarosh regularly offers the head and the leg of the tamid, shar kol yamim makriv on all other days of the year, besides leading up to Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol can always interject, he can always butt in and do the avodah if he wants to. Kohen Gadol makriv chelik barosh. Kohen Gadol has the right of first refusal, the right to offer whenever he wants, as opposed to all other Kohanim are on a mishmar, they're on a schedule. And the Kohen Gadol doesn't have to wait for his time. His time is any time. But no tel chelik barosh, he has the right to the first portion of sacrificial meat that goes, the gifts that go to the Kohen. Kohen Gadol could take first. So there are certain perks of the job. So Montana, Maris asks, who's the Tana of our Mishnah that says that the Kohen Gadol is involved in the avoda the week before Yom Kippur? Malchista, look Rabbi Akiva. We don't know who it is, but it's not Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Akiva, because if it was Rabbi Akiva, Hamar Taor Shenafla Alav Hazah. Rabbi Akiva said that a person that's Tahor, right, that gets some, gets a backsplash, gets some sprinkling of mechatas, water with the paradum ashes on it, also becomes tameh, right? So heichi aved avoda. So during the process, the week before Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol gets sprinkled every day. According to Rabbi Akiva, he becomes tameh or some degree of tuma, not something that's going to stick, but he's tameh on that day that he gets sprinkled. If that's the case, then he can't be doing the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash during his sequester period. So it can't be Rabbi Akiva, right? Netanya, Visa Torah al Tameh. The process of sprinkling mechatas paraduma water generally, where a tahor person sprinkles on the tameh person. Al hatameh tahor, al tahor tameh. Right. This is one of the paradoxes that makes mechatas, makes paraduma so difficult to understand. The tameh person is rendered tahor, but the tahor person that's sprinkling becomes tameh. Did Rabbi Akiva? That's what according to Rabbi Akiva. Chachamim omrim ein hadvarim alalu amurim el b'dvarim hamakalim tuma. Right? That's only with things that are makabel tuma. Right? That is not. So the basically Chachamim say that this doesn't count. When you're doing it for the Kohen Gadol, it doesn't count as part of the avoda, and it won't make a tahor person. It won't make a tahor person tameh under those circumstances. Mahi, what does this mean exactly? Kidditanan, we're in the Mishnah. Niskavin lahazos ala behema. The person intended to sprinkle mechatas on an animal. Why would you do that? We don't know why, but they're not makabel tuma. V'yizal adam, and instead you sprinkle upon a person. Imish be'ezov. If there's still water in the branch that you used to sprinkle, yishna, you may use that mixture again. You can use the rest of what's on the azov to sprinkle on the person you meant it to. Niskavin lahazos al adam. Vizal behema. You meant to do it the right way. You meant to sprinkle on a person, but it ends up going on an animal. Meish be'ezov. If there's still some of the mixture left in the ezov, lo yishna. You may not use it again. It's become invalid. Once you sprinkle it on a behema that's not valid, then you can't go back and sprinkle it on a person. But if the other way around, you meant to do it on a behema, I'm not sure why, and then you accidentally do it on a person, you can then go back and do it on the other person. My time to Rabbi Kiva. Why does Rabbi Kiva say that when you sprinkle, person who sprinkles mechatas on a tamei person, the Torah person becomes tamei? The Pasuk could have said the Torah person sprinkles upon him. And of course, it's clear that you're sprinkling on a tamei person. That's why you sprinkle mechatas. My al hatamei. Why does it say vizat or al hatamei? Shmamina kol hatamei tahor v'kol tahor tamei. To make it clear, vizat tahor al hatamei. The person who starts out tahor becomes tamei. The person who starts out tamei becomes tahor. Rabbanan. Right? How do they understand this extra? Vizat tahor al tamei. It comes to tell us something general about how you only sprinkle on things that are makabel tuma. But in the case where the water was sprinkled upon someone who's already tahor, kavachomeru. It's obvious that the tahor person remains tahor. Imal tamei tahor. If the sprinkling of mechatos makes a tamei person into tahor, al tahor l'kol shekain. Certainly follow that he remains tahor if he's already tahor. Rabbi Kiva says no. Shlomo. Yeah, that makes sense. But we already know there's a tradition that the protocols of the mechatos of the paraduma ashes don't make sense. Because Amarti Shlomo Melech said, I wanted to understand it, and it was the meaning was far beyond me. We understand that to mean that he was talking about the paradoxes, the difficult to understand elements of mechatas, of the waters of the paraduma. Rabbanan, how do they understand this idea? The Rabbanan say, no, it's logical. What does Shlomo Melech mean that it was far away for me to understand? Hulamazu mazin alav tahor. This is in regards to the fact that one who sprinkles the water and the one upon whom the water is sprinkled both become tahor. Nogeva and tameh. But the one who touches the water becomes tameh, right? So you get sprinkled, person who sprinkles and the person gets sprinkled. They both are tahor. You touch the mechatas, not in the context of having it sprinkled upon you or sprinkling it, then you become tameh. That's the paradox Shlomo Melech didn't understand. My mazeh nogeya, and the word mazeh refers to touching it. Vaksiv mazeh, vaksiv nogeya, but how can you reinterpret it to be mazeh? It refers to nogeya, that even though it says sprinkling, it means touching. They're two different terms. It's used in two different contexts in the Torah. The one who sprinkles has to have his clothing cleaned, right, in the mikvah before he does so. The person who touches doesn't require mikvah for his clothing beforehand. Elamai mazeh no say. What does it mean? Mazeh means the person who carries the waters of the mechatas. That person can become tameh. And he becomes more tameh than the person who just touches the waters outside of sprinkling. The person who carries the waters, he becomes tameh, and his clothing becomes tameh as well. Nichdar Rachmana no say. If it means no say, it means carrying, then why does it say mazeh, sprinkling? My time aksiv mazeh. Ha kamash malan to be on shir hazah. How much do you have to carry in order to become tameh, you and your clothing? The amount that's necessary, the shir hazah, the amount that would be necessary in order to sprinkle on someone. This only works according to the Mandamar that there's a minimum amount of water, ashes in the water, in order for the sprinkling to be kosher. But according to the opinion, it says there is no minimum amount. If there's no minimum amount, then what's the point of carrying the waters using the word mazeh? There's nothing to learn there. There is no shear. Your answer is I feel Mandamar Hazai and Tzricha Shir, but according to Mandamar that there is no minimum shear that you need in order to sprinkle, and therefore there's no minimum shear in order that you carry it to become tameh. Hani mili agava gavra. This only as it relates to the amount that needs to fall on the person being sprinkled. Even a tiny amount of water without a shear suffices. The mana tzricha shear, but the actual vessel that you're using in order to dip the azo, in order to sprinkle on the person, that needs to have a minimum amount. And since there's a minimum amount, that's the amount that needs to be nosei in order for you to become tameh. So therefore, mazeh makes sense. There's a shear hazah, not necessarily what gets sprinkled, but the vessel, the utensil that is holding the waters into which you dip the azo of the hisa. The Tanan, because there's a mishnah that says how much water, what's the volume necessary for there to be hazah, kadesh yitbol, enough so that it can be dipped, rashe giv'olin v'yazeh. The stems of the azov or the hyssop stalks need to be able to get wet in order to sprinkle, right? Because you're using a utensil. In order to sprinkle, that utensil has to be able to get wet, and that amount of water, mechatas, ashes water, needs to be available in the receptacle. On the top of Yudal and Beis. Abaye Amar Afilu Tema Rabbi Kiva, right? But we said that the Mishnah can't be Rabbi Kiva because, according to Rabbi Kiva, there's a fundamental. According to Rabbi Kiva, there's a problem. How could Rabbi Kiva allow the Kohen Gadol to be involved in the avoda if the sprinkling every day as prep for Yom Kippur would have made him tameh? So Bayamar, I feel to Rabbi Kiva, no, this could go according to Rabbi Kiva, even though the Avid Avoda Kule Yoma. He would do the avoda all day, Ulpanya Madule. Then as it got late, they would sprinkle the ashes with Tavel, the Avid Harav Shemesh, and right before night he would go in the mikvah because he became tameh as a result of getting sprinkled. And then Harav Shemesh, the sun would set, he'd become tahor again. So he'd have a very busy late afternoon after he was done with all the avoda. We'll see what constitutes the end of the avoda every day in a little bit. He would get sprinkled, become tameh, he would go to the mikvah, the sun would set, become tahor again, and then start it all over again. So even according to Rabbi Kiva, we could say that the Kohen Gadol was involved in the avoda leading up to Yom Kippur. That seems to be what we prefer, the idea that he wasn't just sitting in his room, but he was getting prepared by getting familiar with the rhythms of the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. Gemara says another one of the things that the Kohen Gadol would do in the week prior to Yom Kippur, he would offer the ketoris, the incense, and he would prepare the menorah lamps. It sounds like first you offer ketoris and then you set up the candles, the lamp. Minu, we have the Gemara in Talmud says otherwise. Whoever cleared the inner altar, the altar of the incense, from all the ashes that developed overnight, Misha Zacha b'menorah, whoever had the privilege of preparing the lights, Misha Zacha b'ketoras, whoever had the privilege of offering the incense. So it seems that, according to the Talmud, the order was first menorah, then ketoras. In our Mishnah, it seems to say it says first ketoras and then menorah. Rahuna man Tana Talmud. Who's the Tana in Talmud? Rav Shimon Isha Mitzvahu, right? It's a specific, and we don't hold like him, right? What says in Talmud is not the consensus. The consensus is here: first ketoras, and then hatamas and neros. But we have a tradition that from Rav Shimon Isha Mitzvah, the other way around, right? That opposite of some of those, right? Some of the teachings of Rav Shimon Ish Mitzvah are not the Tanakama of Tractate Talmud. So how can you say that this statement is Rav Shimon Ish Mitzvah? It's none, right? So now we're going to get a little bit of a tangent in Talmud. Yoma is going to be about the Beis Hamikdash and the service there, and all different manifestations thereof. Right? The Kohen would arrive at the northeast corner of the Mizbeach, of the big Mizbeach. Nosi Mizrach Tzfona, right? He throws the blood from the carbon on the northeast corner. Marois Dromis, Nosim Marois Dromis. It goes from northeast to southwest. He throws blood there. V'tani Allah, and on that we have a Rav Shimon Yishba mitzvah Mishane b'Tamid. Shimon mitzvah says that's not the order for the Tamid, right? By the Tamid, it's a different order. Mizrach Tzvonis Nosim Mizrach Tzvona. First he goes northeast. And Marav is Dromis Nosim Marav Avach Kach Nosim Droma. Right? Northeast you go east and north, and then you go southwest, but you go west and then south. Right? So Rosh Hashanah mitzvah is not the Tanakama. So how can you say that as it relates to the order of menorah and ketores that it's Rosh Hashanah mitzvah? So Elam Rabbi Yochanan said, Matana Seder Yoma. Who's the Tana in Yoma? Rosh Hashanah mitzvah. Who? It's not what the Talmud was not Rosh Hashanah mitzvah. The Yoma order, first ketores and then Hadalas Aneros, that's Rosh Hashanah mitzvah. Rami Seder Yoma. But we have a problem. There's a stira within Yoma itself. What's the stira? Ditnan. Pais Hasheni Mishochet. The second lots, right? There was a group that the Kohanim would serve that day, but who would serve what? Based on a lottery. The second lots were used for who would shecht, the Tamid Shal Shachar, Mizorek, who would throw the blood on the Mizbeach. Mimidashim Mizbeach HaPnimi, who would clear out the inner altar with the Ketores. Mimidashim Netzach Menorah, who would clean out the Menorah. Mimale Varim Lakevesh. Who would bring the actual animal parts, the limbs of the Tamid up the ramp. Payas Ashlishi, and the third lottery would be Chadashim L'Ktores Bo V'Hafisu. Those new to bringing Ketores come and draw lots, right? Because there's this idea, comes up with Sandik at a bris, that the Ketores was a segula for Ashiras. You offer the Ketores, you become rich. So every Kohen was allowed to do it once, right? So of all the Kohanim that were left that hadn't done anything that day, any of them that had not yet done the Ketores in their lifetime would be invited to have that opportunity. And there's this idea that offering Sandikos is being a Sandik is like offering the Ketores, and everyone should have the chance to do it once. Once you do it once, then it's a question. Of course, if a grandfather to a lot of different children and grandchildren for different children may do it more than once. There's this connection made between offering Ketores and offering the baby to the Moel as a Sandik. It's a Siman, it's a Segula for Ashiras. You get to do it once. But for our purposes, we see that the order is different there. Right? The order is that Ketores is last. And yet the Mishnah said that Ketores comes before the Hatavas Haneros. So Abaye, right? So Abaye says, right, we're opposite Amar Abaye in the Tosfos. Amar Abaye, Lo Kasha, Kan Batavas Neros, right? Hatavas Neros that comes first, right, is the two lamps of the menorah. Kan Batavas Chamesh Neros, the other five. Right, what's going on here? There was two steps. First, the five were cleaned. Then there was another avoda, and then the last two were cleaned. Right? What was in between the two and the five and the two? Was it the throwing of the blood, or was it the burning of the ketores? But it was definitely in two parts. The cleaning of the menorah, first five branches, then the last two branches. Are you going to say that it was the ketores that was in between? According to the Chachamim, it was the ketores that interrupted between the cleaning of the first five branches and the last two. We have this. The Abaye has a whole order of the daily service, right? That he was received by the students. Which made the Gemara, right? It was the tradition, and B'dama Tamid Mafsik Lehu. It wasn't the Ketores that was in between five and two branches. It was the Dam Tamid. So Amri Lokasha, it's not a question. Now he Labasho. Abaye's listing, which you read in Karbonos, is Aliba Dabashol, right? Aliba Dabashol is Dama Tamid, is that which interrupts cleaning of the menorah. Harabanan, our Mishnah, where Ketores interrupts the cleaning of the menorah is the Chachamim. Abaye is Aliwa Davashol. Tanya, we learn Lo Yetiv Esaneros Vachakach Yakter. Person should not prepare all the branches of the menorah, and then only then do Ketores. Al Yakter Vachakach Yetiv. First do the Ketores, and then finish preparing the menorah. Abashol Omer Meiti Vachakach Maktir. No, first you prepare the menorah, and then you offer the Ketores. My time with Abashol, and what's the reason for Abashol? Why? Because the pasuk says, "Dichsiv ba'boker ba'b'tovoker be'tivas haneros." Every morning, prepare the lamps of the menorah. V'hadar yaktirena, and then later on, yaktirena haneros. Right? Then you shall bring incense. First, it has to be prepared, all of the lamps, and then you bring the ketores. Rabbanan Ma'kamei Rachmana. How do the Rabbanan understand this statement? That first hatava, and then ketores. Right, next page, Tesvav Aleph. Bidan Hatava Temaktir Ketores. Right? It just means at the same time when the preparation is taking place, you should also offer the Ketores. It's not that you're done, you're in the middle of it. That's how the Rabbanan understand it. Hilo Temachi, and there's a proof to the Rabbanan. The Ketores takes place in the midst of preparing the menorah. Otherwise, Bein Arbayim. Right? How do you understand what goes on not in the morning but in the afternoon? The Ksiv. In the afternoon, Yaktireni should bring up the Ketores. Are you going to say that Ketores comes after the lighting of the menorah? Mother Makti Ketores shall be in Arbayim. And then only afterwards, after the offering of the menorah, after lighting the menorah, you're going to offer the incense. You're going to say that's okay in the afternoon. But Tanya, you have a brayso that says otherwise. Me'erev ad boker. Right? The lamps of the menorah are from Erev until Boker. Right? Tain la midasa. They give its full measure of oil. Why? Should they delekas v'lechas kol laila me'erev boker. But the menorah should burn all night from evening until morning. The varachem Erev boker. What else does Erev boker mean? Not just in terms of the amount of oil that you should burn. There's no other service valid from evening until morning except for the menorah. Right? Kindling of the menorah has to be the very last avoda night, afternoon, let's say, and the very first one in the morning. So nothing can take place afterwards. Certainly not the ketores. Elamai kamer rachmana. Rather, what is the menorah? What does it mean? That yaktirena binan adlaka temaktir ketores. At the time when you're taking place the lighting of the menorah, you should also light the incense. So achanami binan atava temaktir ketores. Just like the ketores has to take place before the lighting of the menorah at night, which is around the same time. So too, the lighting, the ketores in the morning should be at the time when you're preparing the lamps. It doesn't have to be afterwards. It could be during. Abba Shalom Alach. Abba Shalom would say, as it relates to the lighting of the menorah, Hasid Nechsiv Oso. Right? Aaron shall light Oso. The menorah from Me'erev ad Boker. Right? That the menorah is the last avoda during the daytime, right? And therefore ketores has to come before it. In the morning, there's no oso, so it doesn't have to necessarily be that that the menorah comes after the ketores. Maybe the ketores comes after the preparing of the menorah, right? Which we saw from before, Beitivo is Haneros Yaktirena. First you prepare the menorah, and then only afterwards do you light the ketores. Okay, so we're getting into some very specific details. The whole point of this was that the Kohen Gadol is allowed to engage in the service. We took a little bit of a tangent to talk about what exactly was the service in general, not just the week before Yom Kippur, but when any Kohen was involved in the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. In terms of these pieces specifically, we were talking about ketores and the offering of and the lighting of the menorah. Have a wonderful week.